What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Figure It Out of the Basement's Black Series talk show. I'm Nate, joined with Justin.
What's up, guys?
And today it's time for the age-old debate.
Yes.
Soft goods versus hard sculpted plastic.
Which side will you choose? One shall stand, one shall fall.
Don't forget to hit like, subscribe if you are new. We're always talking about Black Series here on the channel. Justin, soft goods versus hard sculpted plastic.
It's always a debate. I would say even more so in the recent years of the Black Series because I feel like soft goods has kind of made a return.
Yeah, there
like,
was
like 2023, 4, 5.
There was definitely a few years there where you could tell they were really dialing back on how much soft goods we were seeing, which at the time, rightfully so, because the early soft goods that we have in the Black Series, not good. It's not good.
Right. So we do have some pros and cons to each, and I would say we would definitively land somewhere, but in all reality, it's just a case-by-case basis.
Of course.
So, I don't know, what do you want from us, all right? Let's jump into soft goods first, talking about the pros. The first pro is definitely going to be that there is more perceived value with soft goods. That's just how it goes. I've seen people try to make arguments either way, like, does that give it more value? But the consensus for the most part, yes. What do you think?
I mean, I think anytime you introduce like a different type of material, it kind of adds to like a premium aspect of the figure. Like, you know, anytime if a certain figure has like die cast metal parts or soft goods, you know, stuff like that, it does add to the perceived value just because it lends itself to a more premium product like you would see with like a hot toy or something like that, you know?
Right. And obviously we're not in the industry, but if I had to guess, it probably is more expensive to do soft goods.
Potentially.
Like, just with the creation of the action figure, like the manufacturing, if I were to guess it'd be more expensive because like you were saying, it's like additional materials that you have to do and like certain cutting and like if there's a design or if it's stitched.
Right.
Or something like that to make it sit more naturally. I would imagine it's slightly more and takes up a bit more of the budget. So I would say it does increase a figure's perceived value.
Typically, soft goods also adds to the range of motion of a figure.
Oh, yes.
Anytime you have some soft goods versus, you know, let's just say, for instance, a Jedi robe. A sculpted Jedi robe versus a soft goods Jedi robe, obviously you're going to get a lot more movement from the soft goods versus a sculpted plastic piece, which could often lead to like traffic cone syndrome a lot.
Yeah.
So
100%.
you definitely get that little bit more range when you have the soft goods, especially on like robed characters.
Yeah, I was going to say Bib Fortuna or something.
Right, yeah, if Bib Fortuna would have had soft goods, he probably wouldn't be such a traffic cone.
Right. So, I mean, the ARC troop, like clone troopers that have the soft goods comma piece definitely have more range of motion in the legs, especially compared to something like the ARC troopers that use that solid plastic piece.
Right.
Also, like capes and cloaks. My mind goes to like Glavis Ringworld Mando versus the old Mando.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't even put the jetpack on with the cape on at the same time.
Right.
You had to take the cape off, then put the jetpack on. But now, you can just move that cape around, put the jetpack in, and obviously Glavis Ringworld having that soft goods cape, massive upgrade.
And then we've got some really excellent examples like Darth Malgus. His hood is easily one of the best Black Series hoods, probably the best soft goods hood in the line. They took a unique approach to the hood. They actually glued pieces of it down to the armor so that it actually sits properly like how he looks.
Yes.
But also, the upside, once again, you can actually move his head side to side, up, down. You know, he could look all over the place because of the soft goods.
Yeah, so when it's done right, the cloaks, the capes, the tunics, whatever it is, can be done really, really well. Something like, I don't know, Doc Ondar is a great example of, that's a lot of soft goods. and it works really well. Zuckus,
True.
a lot of soft goods, but it works really well. So when it's done right, I feel like it increases that premium feel, perceived value, and it does help with range of motion, like absolutely. But how about the cons, Nate? Let's get into the cons of soft goods.
There's definitely plenty of cons to soft goods. Mainly what we find is, obviously a lot of times with soft goods, you will lose any amount of sculpted detail that is potentially on the actual costume itself. The primary example is if you look at the Vintage Collection Fennec Shand versus the Black Series Fennec Shand. On the Vintage Collection one, they went the soft goods route, and you have almost no detail on her skirt piece, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, it's like the lower part of her costume where it's like you really have a lot of texture detail, like, I don't want to say sequins, but like line work and texture that you really do miss on the TVC figure with that soft goods, and it honestly looks really beautiful on the Black Series. You get all of that sculpted detail that is part of the costume. So in some cases, we do prefer hard plastic for something like that, and Fennec Shand is always like my go-to, just perfect example of that. But you could also say like wrinkles and just like the overall shape and texture of a cape. You know, for example, I know this is a negative example, but something like Director Krennic or Moff Gideon, you get that like fold detail, those crinkle details that you wouldn't have with soft goods.
Right.
So there's pros and there's cons to it. But you do miss out on that sculpted detail when you do soft goods.
Right. A lot of times it can also lead to a more dollish appearance, so to speak.
Yeah.
Mainly if you look at old examples of some Black Series figures like Farm Boy Luke, which just looks terrible because the soft goods are way oversized.
Right.
And it just ends up looking comical. The original Leia as well, too. She's also toilet paper status as well. You know, it's just completely oversized. I think that's a big issue when it comes to soft goods, is nailing the correct like scale of the soft goods.
Absolutely. My mind goes to like the NECA 8-inch line, where it's like their cloth goods line, and they all look super goofy,
right,
compared to their 7-inch Ultimates. But yeah, Luke and Leia, great example. Even something like Sidious without the stitching, like we've had.
True.
I mean, bro looks like a bumbling idiot in that soft goods presentation. So I mean, you do run the risk of having it look like a doll. And I know Landspeeder Luke, I'm curious to see how he thinks about this video, but this is where, like, in these instances, I'm like full on board with Landspeeder Luke, because I'm like, some of those examples out there are truly abhorrent.
Yeah, definitely.
Now let's look at the pros of hard plastic, sculpted plastic as opposed to soft goods. We've already mentioned how with sculpted plastic you can put in more detail, and that is true. And again, case by case basis, but you can also make things look more natural. So one of my main examples here is hoods. Malgus is kind of an enigma. It's
true.
Malgus is kind of a one-off. So my mind goes to something like Sidious.
Yeah. The recent Revenge of the Sith version that has a sculpted hood, and actually is like a little bit of mixed media, because you get the sculpted hood and then you actually get the soft goods robes.
Yeah.
Which I think for hoods in the Black Series, they almost always do struggle when it is soft goods. Any Jedi, any character that has a hood that's not Malgus, basically any character that doesn't have the hood stitched or glued in place.
Yes.
You're most likely going to have a bad time. And that's just the nature of having such small, 1/12 scale figures, trying to make clothes for them, essentially.
Right.
It's very hard to pull off. It requires some like really expert stitching and design work, which obviously we know is not always the case when it comes to the Black Series. So yeah, like we mentioned, you get great sculpted details out of hard plastic. Fennec Shand looks awesome. Her skirt details are really nicely done. Even something like the commas that are on the ARC Troopers actually have like some pretty intricate design work on them.
Right, and you can make the argument like that's why they need to be plastic.
Right, because we probably would not get such complex detailing on a soft goods comma for the ARC Troopers. So it's kind of like it's a give and take, especially for the ARC Troopers, because obviously it murders their articulation.
Yep.
But if it was soft goods, they would probably be even more inaccurate because they wouldn't be able to do all the different crazy design work on their commas.
Right, and then there's something like Captain Rex, where the number 59 red and black box Captain Rex has a soft goods comma, and then the new Phase 1 doesn't.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, they've done it soft goods before. Why couldn't we just continue that? And then the new Bakara has a soft goods comma. I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Why can't we make up our minds? But I was also going to add, there are certain figures where it's the same figure. Soft goods will work for one, and it'll be a better figure for the other one. So Darth Maul, he needed the soft goods lower part near the waist to fit onto the Bloodfin. But if you take that figure off the Bloodfin and pose him around, he doesn't look as good as the single release Maul.
Yeah.
That is the harder plastic. Well, it's plastic, but it's like a soft plastic, so it won't hinder his articulation. So that really just highlights how it's a case-by-case basis, because he needs it to sit on the Bloodfin, but it's a better figure aesthetically, and the articulation isn't hindered on the single release either.
Yeah.
Again, it all depends, and it's all a case-by-case basis. There are some cons, the limited articulation. I think that's the biggest issue with hard plastic. I mean, again, my mind instantly goes to Krennic.
Right.
And how it's just like Krennic, his cape is just a shell. It's a shell.
It absolutely is. To a lesser extent, like Moff Gideon, the first release of him.
Oh my gosh.
You know, it like doesn't quite come up as much as Krennic, but it is still enough to where like you start moving his arms around, the cape just like wants to pop off the back constantly. So you're just sitting there getting frustrated because you know if it was just a soft goods cape, it wouldn't be anywhere remotely near as annoying. So I think I agree with you, though. That is the biggest issue. Like we already mentioned, too, the ARC Troopers, you know, their legs are pretty much locked in place.
They're stuck, yeah.
Because of the comma. Now, it is, like we mentioned, due to the design, especially with, like, the weird, like, strap things that they have going across the front.
Absolutely.
That's stuff that, like, they really couldn't execute well with soft goods. So I'm like glad they did that, but at the same time, I want the ARC Troopers to be dynamic and be really posable, because you see clone troopers constantly in action, in battle, doing dynamic poses, running, jumping, shooting, all that good stuff. And those commas on the ARC Troopers really do hold those figures back in terms of that kind of posability.
Let me ask you this. Landspeeder Luke very frequently brings this up, how he doesn't like when it's a combination of hard plastic and soft goods, because I think his logic is it's either one or the other. So when a figure like Leia's dress from Yavin's ceremony, how it's like hard plastic, but then it has like little flaps of soft goods. How do you feel about situations like that?
I feel like those are also case by case, because Darth Sidious would be an example that I would say I really enjoy. I think they nailed the soft goods portion of that figure, and I think they also nailed the sculpted hood detail.
True.
I think mainly, like I said earlier, when it comes to Black Series, my biggest issue with soft goods is almost always the hood. It's never typically like, oh, you know, the arms are a little too baggy, or maybe the robe is too short or too long or something like that.
You just put that robe up and it's just like comically large.
It's always like puffed around the head, and you got to sit there and you got to mess with it. And I know someone's going to comment on this video, all you got to do is just get it wet and then you could shape it and dry it and it'll be fine. But we shouldn't have to do that.
Right.
These figures should be acceptable out of the packaging. You know, you should be able to just put the hood up and it looks decent. But that's just not a reality, especially for domestic 6-inch Hasbro figures.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I don't mind the mix at all. Something like Ventress comes to mind. Like a really good combination of soft goods with hard plastic for like the sash piece in the middle, whatever that is. Or my mind also goes to like Shock T.
Yeah, coming
or up. Luminara Unduli. That's another one that has like that plastic sash middle piece thing, but obviously it's a soft goods skirt. It's going to help with their leg articulation.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, if Luminara and Shock T were sculpted plastic, they'd both be traffic cones. And I also even think the latest Leia figure, I almost would have preferred mixed media on her. Because while the new Leia figure is fantastic, it's a great release.
She can't kneel.
She can't kneel. So you can't hit the iconic pose of her, you know, putting the message into R2. And with mixed media, if they would have just done soft goods for the lower piece, obviously we could have hit that pose no problem.
Yeah. So I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about that mix. Like, do you think it breaks up the aesthetics of the figure too much? Or is it acceptable like the Sidious that has the plastic hood? To end this video, Nate, I know our real genuine answer to this question is obviously it's a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
But if you had to choose a team, are you team soft goods or are you team hard plastic? Just generally speaking, when it comes to action figures in general, or I guess we could specifically, you know, Black Series. Are you in the soft goods camp most of the time, or are you in the hard plastic camp most of the time?
That's tough. That's really tough. But I honestly feel like I would prefer the sculpted plastic over soft goods. Simply because a lot of times the sculpting can make the figure look more accurate. Again, case in point would be Farm Boy Luke.
Bro's kind of spitting right now.
You look at the new Farm Boy Luke versus the soft goods Farm Boy Luke. And they did such a great job with the sculpt. You know, they were able to sculpt the wrinkles. They're able to make it look like it's a piece of clothing that's being worn. Whereas I feel like more often than not, soft goods end up just looking like some weird, cheap piece of cloth that someone hastily sewed together. And they're like, oh, it's good enough.
I feel like there's too many instances of, oh, this is kind of ruined by the soft goods.
Right.
However, if it's just something like a cape, like a simple cape or a Jedi cloak, obviously soft goods. Like, obviously soft goods. But when it comes to, like, the actual design of the character, I feel like I more so commonly land in the hard plastic camp. Yeah.
I definitely agree with you there. If it's a cape, obviously not Black Series, but my mind goes to like McFarlane DC figures, you know, a sculpted Batman cape versus an awesome wired soft goods Batman cape.
You're right.
It's just like there's no comparison. The sculpted cape, obviously it's going to give you one look, but soft goods, especially if it's wired, obviously Hasbro doesn't do wires, but that unlocks almost limitless potential with making the cape look like it's flowing in the wind, it's blowing to the left, it's blowing to the right, you know, stuff like that. So I love soft goods when there's wires, but when we're talking Black Series, when we're talking Hasbro, we know we're not getting wires.
Facts.
So
Facts.
Yeah, I think I would actually be team hard plastic at the end of the day. Like I said, simply because most of the time you can get a much more accurate looking figure, although it may cost the articulation.
And for me, I feel like I prefer visual aesthetics over articulation at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean,
thank goodness we're in Black Series and not some other line, because clearly Hasbro also focuses more on visual presentation over articulation for Black Series. It's not like we're getting double jointed pinless,
right?
Or anything like that. So
yeah,
I agree. I think if hard plastic yields a more accurate looking figure, that would be, if I had to choose, that would be the camp that we end up in. But the official, that was just for funsies. The official Out of the Basement opinion, obviously, guys, it's a case-by-case basis. But please do let us know in the comments down below, what are some of your favorite examples of soft goods that work, soft goods that don't work, situations where hard plastic really worked in certain situations. I know we only had a few, examples today, but I'd be really curious in hearing what you guys have to say about this.
And with that being said, that's all we've got for you on this week's episode of Figure It Out. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you are new. We're always talking about Star Wars, the Black Series here on the channel. If you are in a position to help support us directly, we do also offer a couple different channel membership tiers. Check those out in the description down below. And while you're there, make sure to join our Discord. That's totally free. You just got to make an account, and it's a great way to get connected with us and other like-minded members of the community at large. We got to give a huge shout out and a special thank you to all of our current channel members. Your continued support is truly appreciated, and thank you to everyone else out there for watching. I'm Nate. I've been joined with Justin.
See you guys later.
And we will see you all next time on Out of the Basement.